Hey there, welcome to the sermon preview for this week. Really glad you're taking a second to join me here today. We're back in the studio after last week. We were taking a stroll with Corey Short. He brought a wonderful sermon on Sunday focused on the first part of chapter 3 in Colossians. And so this week we are continuing on in our Colossians series called Greater Than, focusing on how Jesus is greater than everything else. And so we're going to be looking at Colossians chapter 3, verses 12 through 17. Now, before we jump into this, we have to kind of set the foundation for it. And it actually goes back a little bit to some of the verses that Corey was talking about last week, looking in the first 1 through 4 verses of chapter 3. It really kind of sets the stage. We see things like, focus on things of above, not on things of the earth, or, you were put to death in this life and you were raised with Christ, right? Things like that, right? And so we've got very much have this idea of we have died to our old self, and because of Jesus, because of what Jesus has done, we have a new self, right? Or new status within the kingdom of God. Before, we were not a part of God's family, but then with Jesus and what he did, we are now have the status of being children of God. And so really what Corey did is he set that foundation for us last week, and then he focused on the later part of his passage, focused on kind of the things we are to put off, right? The negative things that we aren't supposed to do anymore, things of the old life, of our old status that we weren't supposed to do anymore. And that really set a great foundation for what we need to look at this week, which is all about what do we put on, right? We have this idea of clothing, right? Where Paul uses this idea of take off this item of clothing, this negative thing, put on this good thing, these things that Jesus wants us to have. So we see in verses 12 through 17 here that Paul, he starts out by listing various different virtues or things that we're supposed to put on, right? And then he says, above all these other things, put on love. And so love is kind of the foundation piece for these other virtues. And he talks about how we need to let the peace of Christ dwell or to rule our hearts, and to allow the word of Christ to dwell within us, right? So we really, this idea of letting the word of Christ dwell within us richly, this is verse 16. This is more or less kind of the foundation piece of this passage, because we see that when he dwells in us, all of these other things come about, these virtues come about, the things that he lists afterwards of teaching and admonishing in all wisdom and singing psalms and hymns. These are all things that happen when we let Christ dwell in us richly. And so that's kind of the thought that I want to leave you with, that I want you to reflect on this week leading up to Sunday, is how have you let the word of Christ dwell within you? So the teachings of Christ, the example that he leaves, how have you let these things, the stuff that Jesus did on earth, how have you let that dwell richly within you? And also, when you've done that, how has that affected your life? Have you seen effects of that? Have you seen positive effects of that coming out of, I've intentionally let the word of Christ dwell within me, and I have seen this come out as a result. So I'm looking forward to Sunday. It's going to be great to continue off and piggyback off of what Corey preached on last week in his message, to see we've put these things off, but now we're putting these things on. What does Paul mean when he says, let's put these things on? Above all, put on love, put on all these other things, and let Christ dwell richly within you. It's going to be a great Sunday. Really looking forward to seeing you there, 9:15. Take care.